Hello and welcome to the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America's live webinar, Finding Your Purpose in Life. I am Peter Demiri, Senior Director of Content Development for MSAA and your host for tonight's program. On behalf of MSAA and our guest presenter, Dr. Adam Kaplin, we thank you so much for joining us tonight and hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. And we do apologize for the lateness and the technical issues we were experiencing. As you may have read in our recent announcements, March is recognized as MS Awareness Month, and MSAA's theme this year is Improving Mental Health and Wellness, a very important yet often overlooked topic in MS care, especially as we continue through this pandemic. Tonight's program kicks off a series of digital educational events, which also include a March 16th webinar on managing depression and anxiety in MS, a podcast on caring for the care partner, articles on our peer community, blog posts, and much more. All of this great content and the webinar registration form can be found on our dedicated MS Awareness Hub at mymsaa.org. Also, tonight kicks off our new virtual display hall, which you might have seen in the chat box before the start of the program. This online resource details some of the products and patient assistance services offered by our selection of sponsors. MSAA would like to thank Biogen and Genentech for taking part in this new virtual opportunity. As you may know, MSAA is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to improving lives today for the MS community. Listed here are just some of the many free programs, including our cooling, equipment, and MRI programs, along with our COVID-19 and MS Pathfinder tool, which provides ongoing updates on the coronavirus and the recently approved vaccines. Also, please know MSAA has extended our helpline hours to 8 p.m. Eastern between Mondays and Thursdays. To learn more, please visit mymsaa.org or give us a call at 1-800-532-7667. And lastly, please note tonight's webinar will be archived to our website within a few days. For the Q&A session, please type your questions into the chat box on the screen, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. And if you're having any technical issues, as we certainly had tonight, please type your concerns into the chat box as well. At this time, I am extremely honored to introduce our special guest presenter, Dr. Adam Kaplan. Dr. Kaplan is a neuropsychiatrist in Baltimore, caring for patients with central nervous system neuroinflammatory diseases such as multiple sclerosis. He graduated magna cum laude from Yale University before earning his MD and PhD at Johns Hopkins, where he now serves as adjunct faculty in the departments of psychiatry and neurology at Johns Hopkins Hospital. He is also the Chief Scientific Officer at MyMD Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Kaplan, thank you so much for being here tonight and presenting on this truly fascinating concept of purpose in life.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. You know, it's the life we lead here, dealing with technology and the like. But just looking at it, we've been able to retain the vast majority of you guys, which is wonderful. And again, I have about 30 slides, which anybody who's heard me talk knows that's not much. So I intend to get through these in time to be able to leave time for questions and answers and having a discussion, because this is a very personal topic that relates to everybody. And what I intend to do tonight is talk about this concept of purpose in life, which has been around since the 1940s, but really has kind of reborn in the past 10 years as it relates to people's health. We are starting to do some work specifically in MS looking at this, but this has a general applicability. And no time more importantly, I think, than now, given what's going on with COVID and the like. So not to be a downer here, but the good news is that the vaccine's here. All the predictions are that certainly by the fall we'll all be vaccinated and have this virus under control. But just from having gone through this and coming out the other side, there's, it's not like it just stops on a dime. Everybody's going to be in a time of trying to, recover from a once in 100-year kind of experience. So I thought I'd start off tonight with a joke, just a little levity before we dive into the meaning of life and purpose in life and the like. So a man goes to his rabbi, he says, "Rabbi, I was really upset today because I found out my son, who I raised in the Jewish tradition, left home and now is converted to Christianity." The rabbi says, "Funny you should mention it. I too have a son who left home and converted to Christianity." The man says, "Rabbi, you? What did you do?" The rabbi said, "Well, like Job before me, I asked God to come to me and explain how this fit into the fabric of the universe." And the man says, "Rabbi, did God come?" "Yes," the rabbi said. "God came to me in the middle of the night, and after I was done explaining what had happened with my son, he stared at me in all of his fiery glory, said, 'Funny you should mention it. I too have a son who left home and converted to Christianity.'" And I think it just sort of proves that the goals we have for ourselves and our loved ones may diverge, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be even more important than we would have anticipated. So what is happiness, and how does happiness and purpose sort of dovetail? Well, we know from the Declaration of Independence that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is right in there in our original declaration as something that we are entitled to. Then there are some other people. Epictetus said the only one way to happiness is to cease worrying about things which are beyond our power. So it's kind of be happy with what you have. Frederick Koenig said happiness, we tend to forget that happiness doesn't come as a result of getting something, but rather recognizing and appreciating what we do have. And gratitude turns out to be, there are positive psychology studies that have been done that if you just think one time a day, say before you go to bed, about one thing you're grateful for, that actually improves people's mental health and helps them keep a positive attitude. Buddha said thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. So again, these are all sort of different views of happiness. And I'm just trying to see here. If I click, will I go? There we go. Great. So, but this is sort of more getting to what we're going to be talking about tonight. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The purpose of life is not to be happy," that's just too short-sighted, looking at the whole sort of goals that we have. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you lived well. This kind of gets closer to the point. Next one, while happiness is an emotion felt in the here and now, it ultimately fades. And just as do all emotions. Meaning, on the other hand, is endured. It connects to the past and the present and the future. And I think, again, this sort of, we'll be getting into this, how this sort of dovetails with some of the concepts of purpose in life. And then finally, he who has a why can live a why to live for can bear almost any how. So let's sort of just sort of review some of going back to Aristotle. So the Aristotelian philosophy was that there is two types of people: those who are hedonistic and derive happiness from things that make them personally happy, and then eudaimonic, those people who derive meaning from helping others or for having a purpose in life. And so again, eudaimonic derives from eu, meaning good, daimon, meaning talent or potential, goes all the way back to Aristotle. And again, what we're talking about tonight is purpose in life, and we'll get into this in more detail. But it's a construct that is defined as a sense that life has meaning, that your life has a meaning. It's not like an independent committee gets together and says, your life has a meaning. It's your belief that your life has meaning and purpose, direction and intentionality, and that this sense plays a guiding role in establishing your goals and the decisions you make. Adults, just as a characteristic of people who have purpose in life, when they do these scores, are people that tend to have a goal, a sense of direction. They feel that their past and their current life is meaningful. They have beliefs that give their lives meaning, sort of informs what they do, and they have desires and goals that are worth living for. And I'm just going to sort of cut over this a little bit. This is just the UN report from 2019 saying that happiness, the things that correlated with happiness included things like how the government treated the people, who were governed. And I mean, I'm not going to get into politics now, but one can see how this would have an impact as we're sort of changing administrations here, and we'll see how things go. The second is generosity, pro-social behaviors, people helping other people. This promotes happiness. And then information technology actually decreases happiness. And again, I'm not going to get into this right now, but in great detail, but I will tell you that if you look globally, the rate of negative affect has been going up and positive affect has been going down. And this just shows in, actually you can't see my little pointer. Good. So this just shows that over the time, starting really going back to 2006, there's been a decrease in happiness overall. And during this time, there's been an increased number of internet hours spent, and sleep has been going down. And this unfortunately correlates with, again, around 2006. This is all ages, so this shows different age groups. And you can see that even though the suicide rates were going down, particularly among young people, where suicide between the ages of 15 and 35 is the second leading cause of death, and even though it was coming down for many people, it then sort of turned here. And again, we're not going to discuss this tonight, but a lot of this relates to the impact of technology. And I'm sure some people were depressed about what was going on with the technology earlier in the evening. So here's Viktor Frankl, and he really got the story going. Viktor Frankl was a Viennese neurologist and psychiatrist. He was trained in both, and he survived the Holocaust, meaning in large part because he wanted to get through the Holocaust in order to share with humanity this philosophy he had, where he said the will to meaning is a primary motivational force for survival. What did he mean? Well, just like we have inborn into us an instinct, if you will, or a drive to reproduce, to save ourselves, to love our family and children, the parental instincts and the like. He said that there is this inborn motivation to a will for meaning, to have a purpose. And so he sort of had this philosophy. It led to logotherapy, which is a type of therapy to help people get in touch with what their purpose is. And then Krumba and Mahalik in the 60s and 70s came up with a 20-question questionnaire. You can find this if you look up Krumba and Mahalik and 20-question or purpose in life. You will pull the 20-question questionnaire off the internet. I'll show you many of the questions in just a moment. But it operationalized things. And basically in factor modeling, these 20 questions factored into three main areas. One was, do you think that there's meaning in existence? Second of all, do you think that you have freedom to create meaning from what's going on? And the third is, do you personally have the will to find meaning? So just to give you an example of what some of these are like, that's interesting. I have to get off of this pointer in order to advance the slide. Great. So here's just some examples. I am usually, and it goes from 1 being the minimal score, 7 being the highest. I'm usually completely bored, all the way up to enthusiastic and exuberant. In life, I have no goals, all the way up to clear goals. In achieving life goals, I've made no progress or completely progressed to fulfillment. So these are an example. Freedom to create meaning. Concerning man's freedom to make choices, I believe man is absolutely free or completely bound by limitations and heredity. Here are examples of finding meaning. Life to me seems always exciting to completely routine. After retiring, I would like to do something exciting I've always wanted to do, or loaf completely the rest of my life. So you can kind of get a sense. It covers a large range. And then here's what's interesting is this kind of was in the literature. People discovered that people with higher purpose in life had easier times recovering from addiction, for instance. And it had positive outcomes in a lot of ways. But this is one of the landmark studies that came out 10 years or 11 years ago now that really changed the way we think about purpose in life. What do I mean by that? Well, this is a study that looked at people who had what's called mild cognitive impairment, which means that they had what we would now consider pre-Alzheimer's. Not everybody with mild cognitive impairment will progress to Alzheimer's, but they have early indications that they're having some word finding problems and the like that are out of proportion to the normal aging. And then at time 0, they checked their purpose in life, and then we followed them prospectively for 6 years. And what they found was really dramatic, which is to say your chance of having Alzheimer's disease at 6 years was 2.4 times greater if you had a low purpose in life than if you had a high purpose in life. And I just want to pause for a second and tell you, we have no good treatments for Alzheimer's disease right now. So the best we have are, Aricept and the like, which basically decrease the rate of progression to Alzheimer's disease by 3 months in what is a 10-year course generally. So if this is causative, and it's by no means been shown that it's cause instead of a correlation, but I just want to pause and say, if this is causative, this is the best treatment known to mankind for Alzheimer's disease. So this is a huge, huge impact. But, of course, you could say, well, maybe people who have good brains, less likely to already be on their way to Alzheimer's disease, are more likely to have a high purpose in life. And so this same group did something very interesting, which is that they then went and looked in people, again, this is over years, and they had people who they scored and then observed for 6, 10 years later, and some of those people died, and then they looked in their brains. Now, normal brains have these neurons, obviously looking very happy, and if they have Alzheimer's, they have what are called tangles, which is this tangle of protein inside the neurons that ultimately kill them, or plaques, kind of gum-like substance that sticks in the brain, and these are associated with Alzheimer's disease. But what's interesting here is this shows as you go down, this means worse cognition, losing cognitive function, losing memory. And as you go out here, this is increased number of plaques and tangles. And what is interesting here is you can see that whether or not the same number of plaques and tangles in your brain, here's a high number of plaques and tangles, whether or not you end up on the line of people who have cognitive impairment or not, had more to do with whether you had a high purpose in life or a low purpose in life. Again, suggesting this is not just a correlation, that having a high purpose in life seems to be associated with whether or not the same burden of injury to the brain is going to manifest itself or not. And that's a rather good start at trying to assess, is this something that is just a correlation or not. So here is also, people have gone on and showed that when you look at specific reasons that people die, such as strokes, heart attacks, and all-cause mortality, there's a dramatic decrease if people have high purpose in life versus a low purpose in life. And in fact, this is the most recent study that came out a couple years ago, which is, again, very dramatic, came out of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, considered perhaps the preeminent medical journal. And what they did here was they measured people's purpose in life, and then they followed them for years afterwards. And again, what they found is that here, as you go down, these little steps are people dying just over the age of 50. And as time goes on, if you have a low purpose in life, you're somewhere between a 2.5 to 3-fold increased risk if you have a low purpose in life, which puts you on this curve, of dying as compared to people who had a high purpose in life. So all-cause mortality, this is really, at the very least, telling us that people who have a low purpose in life are, at least that's a prognostic indicator saying you should be worried about this person. It doesn't mean necessarily that if you can fix their purpose in life that you reverse this, but at the very least, it says that it has significant implications for someone's overall health. And this is just some of the data from Hopkins. This shows, when people come and see me, they're generally depressed. MS has a 50% rate of depression at some point during people's lives. It's the highest rate of depression of any medical, neurological, or surgical disease. And what has been known outside of MS is true here, which is that the higher your depression score, the more likely you are to have a decreased purpose in life. So essentially, what it's telling us is that depression reversibly causes a decreased purpose in life, and that correlation is very high. And that's been known, but it is a temporary and reversible cause. So once people's depressions are improved, they go on, they have good return to their purpose in life wherever they are. And a lot of people say, well, maybe it's all religion. And this study actually nicely showed that they grouped people into people who had a low sense of self-concept clarity. So Some people just have no, they're adrift, in life, and they don't have any connection and the like. And for those people, religiosity does help them. So if they have a low self-concept, a low concept of what is important to them, what's going on in their life, then it can bring them back up to a baseline. But what's important to know is that for the majority of people who have a solid sense of who they are and the like, a good self-concept, whether or not religiosity is involved or not doesn't affect your purpose in life. So it can bring you up if you're someone who leans towards religion. It's providing a philosophical framework that adds meaning and organization to your life, and that's great. But it doesn't ultimately end up changing your purpose in life for those people who have a sense of self-concept and the like. So it's not due to depression that leads to a reversible cause. It's not due to religion per se, because for people who have a sense of self-concept, it really doesn't affect whether they're religious or not. So the question is, what could be linking to purpose in life, and how might this affect people's biology that has such profound effects on people's health? Well, the first thing is, I think this is a useful study. This studied a number of markers of well-being: life satisfaction, which is closer to what we say would be happiness; optimism, how optimistic are you about the future; mastery, how much do you think you're in control of your life; purpose in life; and then a positive affect. And what's interesting is that when they then looked at what correlated with that chance of progressing to dementia, and remember, that's the big signal here, that was 2.5 times, almost 2.5 times more likely to progress to dementia if you had a low purpose in life. Optimism hung in there initially, but once you then included in your analysis whether they were depressed or not, which has a big impact, those people who are optimistic are not depressed. And once you got beyond that, really only purpose in life is the one that correlated, meaning it's not just are you satisfied with your life, do you have a general positive outlook, it's whether you have a belief that your life has a purpose. That's where the money is. Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong with being happy. I'm not against happiness, and I'm not trying to suggest people shouldn't be happy. I'm just trying to suggest for the health consequences, it really is specific to purpose in life. And so what do I think is going on? Well, I'm going to try to persuade you that a lot of this relates to the biology of how the immune system is regulated. So many people know cortisol as the stress hormone, but I will tell you no one's ever gone to the pharmacy to get a cortisol-like drug for stress. People, especially people on this phone, or on this conference, have gone to the pharmacy to get prednisone or hydrocortisone or some cortisol derivative to quiet the immune system down, to bring inflammation down. And so this just showed, when they looked at people's purpose in life, it correlated with those people who had higher levels of cortisol had lower purpose in life, and lower level cortisol had higher purpose in life. Well, what could that be related to? And this kind of shows you the theory, if you will, and I'll show you some more data on this, which is that people who have chronic stress or depression, for instance, that ends up releasing a number of regulators from the brain that go to the adrenal glands that increase glucocorticoid, which is cortisol, which is the brake of the immune system. But if you're constantly depressed or anxious, it's like riding that emergency brake, and now those cells in your immune system are going to stop listening. So whereas cortisol was the brake and therefore put people into a state where they were not likely to have an over-exuberant response to their immune system when infected, or Epstein-Barr virus has been implicated in causing MS by hiding and looking like myelin. Well, if your immune system is already primed, because it's no longer got the emergency brake of cortisol, you're at an increased risk of getting MS, for instance. And we now know there are studies that have shown that depression is a risk factor for getting MS, as it is for lupus and inflammatory bowel disease and rheumatoid arthritis. This is presumably the mechanism. So what does this have to do with purpose in life? Well, people who have a purpose in life, as I'll show you next, how this could relate, but in general, the hypothesis, and we have some data, not as much as I'd like, people who have a high purpose in life, generally their resting cortisol is lower because they have a sort of a rock a sense of, gee, this isn't my life, this is important, this helps guide me. And then if they do have something happen, some stress, they tend to return back to a normal resting cortisol easier than someone who doesn't. And the example I give is a couple of years ago, I was driving home from the beach. A suicidal deer unfortunately jumped out in front of my car, totaled my car. Thank God myself and my wife were fine. Terrible for the deer, unfortunately. And my big concern was, okay, once I was sure everybody was safe, I had to get back to Baltimore because I had patients that were waiting to see me, things I had to do during the day, so I was able to find a car and get back to Baltimore. So, it was a setback. I didn't enjoy it. I was glad to have survived it. But now imagine if my whole life was wrapped up in my car. I had one of those muscle cars. I loved it. I put all my money into it. I knew how to tune it. And now something happened to that car, you can imagine how devastated I'd be. So again, I think that it's an extreme example of, if you have other things, the best things in life aren't things, and if there are other things that are important and not just, focused on something outside of the realm of having a purpose and the like, you can see how that might affect your cortisol and stress. So this is an actual study that was done, and this is caregivers of people who had chronic conditions. Think of this as maybe MS. This wasn't MS, but this is applicable there. Caregivers had increased stress because it's stressful to take care of people compared to controls who are not taking care of people who are have chronic illnesses, strokes, MS, cancer, those kinds of things. And these people also, the caregivers who had increased stress, also had increased cortisol levels in general during the day. That led to a decrease in their glucocorticoid receptors on their immune cells. Their immune cells stopped listening to that. And as a result, they had increased markers of inflammation. And again, this goes back to that idea that without that emergency brake, when you have chronic stress, and you don't have a higher purpose in life, it puts you in a pro-inflammatory condition, and lo and behold, Alzheimer's is very susceptible to the immune system and inflammation, as is stroke, as are heart attacks. So this is kind of the missing link, if you will. So what does it all mean? Well, it is not that our lives must have an absolute or objective meaning or purpose. It's that we define such a purpose and work towards it and believe that it exists. That's the key. And perhaps care providers are too quick to, physicians and the like, to be pill pushers rather than PIL, purpose and life promoters. So one of the things I do is talk to clinicians about, hey, ask your patients, how are they doing? What are they doing with their life? How are they adjusting to life under altered circumstances? And again, perhaps Frankel was right. Perhaps there is this primary motivational force for survival. How did we survive as this naked ape out in the savannah of East Africa when there are all these bigger and badder creatures, saber-toothed tigers and the like? Perhaps it was because we had a need to give back to the group, to help our fellow man and woman. So perhaps it's been underlooked and underemphasized. So a dear friend of mine, Luby Ismail, has talked about, how do you adjust to life under altered circumstances? She has MS, a progressive form, and so she came up with the 3 A's. First, it is accept. I think there's a universal question of why me? Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? So part is to just accept that this happened. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. This just, a bolt of lightning came out of nowhere. Then adapt, because once you accept your situation, you can adapt, and then you can achieve. And I think that a lot of what we all try to do is communicate with others, and our connections to others are what purpose in life is really about. Forgiveness is what connects us to ourselves. I encourage everybody to go easy on yourself, especially during this time of COVID. People are often come to me and say, I shouted at my kids, or I was really short-tempered in the supermarket. You got to give yourself a break. This is tough for everybody. Gratitude, we talked about, that connects us to others, and this purpose in life really connects others to us. So just, 3 last things here, quotes. So, doing nothing for others is undoing of ourselves, said Horace Mann. I couldn't find a quote, so I butchered one here that had this, which is really, our hunger for material things cannot ultimately be sated, meaning that you can't have enough money. There's always someone who has more money. You can't have a good enough car or a good enough house. There's always someone who has a better house, a better car. So whereas the simple gratitude from helping another person is inherently rewarding in a way that leaves us feeling wholly satisfied. And then finally, maybe we feel good when we help others because some small part within us remembers and connects to the knowing that we are all one. And what is interesting, and I'll just close with this and ask for people who have questions, that the reason why this rang true for me is one of the ways we know how to increase purpose in life are the work that Roland Griffiths has been doing with psilocybin and these treatments where the psilocybin treatments that they're now working on for depression and for people who have had cancer and the like. And what's really interesting about these treatments is that they kind of often, and the majority of people experience this, where they suddenly feel connected to the whole world, if not the whole universe. And this kind of connection that they have is one way that people have found to increase purpose in life. So that is, the sum total of what I just wanted to talk about today, and happy to take questions. I think we have at least 10 minutes here, despite the fact that you guys were great for hanging in there and making it through this far. So Peter, is there a next step here, how we might progress to having questions?
Yes, and thank you again, Dr. Kaplan. Excellent presentation, a lot of great information. We did have a number of questions that came in, and I'll start with this one. What would be the first step someone would take in evaluating and finding their purpose in life?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And of course, if I had the answer, I'd be, a guru on some, sitting on high and the like. But what I can tell you is this, that, and just to give you some idea. So the first thing is to tell you that what people have done to try to increase people's purpose in life has included things like, we've survived for millennia as a species by having language and passing down stories from person to person. So a lot of times, just hearing from others or sharing your own experiences. So what's really interesting is that just the fact that everybody's here now on this call puts you into a group of people who are at a significant advantage, because the reason why those studies were done in Alzheimer's disease is because there was this huge protective factor that they saw for people who had certain characteristics. They went to talks. They were connected in their communities. They weren't hermits living off by themselves. They were engaged in helping other people. So, finding ways, and let me tell you, lots of people need help these days. So finding ways to, go out of your way and help your fellow person, fellow man and woman, can really go a long way. Now, everybody has to find out what their goals are. One thing I can tell you as well is that a lot of time people who have MS or other kinds of conditions that nobody asks for, then sometimes it means sort of reshaping your goals. So, for instance, one woman at a conference that I went to, when I was talking about purpose in life, said, well, Dr. Kaplan, my purpose was to, I was going to travel once I was, retired, and I can't, travel and walk up hills and mountains like I had planned on. What am I supposed to do now? And through talking to her, she sort of realized that one of the things she wanted to do was to travel still. And instead of being able to climb mountains, what she could do was go out and figure out how to chart a course for other people. What places in Italy, she really wanted to go to Italy, are amenable to people who have disabilities, are accessible. So she went out and started writing a book about accessibility in various locations. So sometimes the chances are that you have to kind of adjust to life under altered circumstances and sometimes realign your goals. So I don't have a secret answer, but to each person, they have to find their own way of reaching out and making a difference for others.
No, that was very insightful. Thank you. Another question, what advice do you have for care partners, and would you recommend PIL for care partners as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you asked this. I can tell you that without any question, one of the things that I do when I see people with MS is I always take, and sometimes it just takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes to check in with that care partner, because it's hard to be up a creek, but if you lose your paddle and you're up a creek, you're in real trouble. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is people who are the care partners almost universally have this survivor's guilt. Well, I'm the one who can walk around and I don't have any of these hidden symptoms, and I'm in good shape. And so as a result of that, they say, but I can't possibly go off with my girlfriends and go, have a mani-pedi. I can't go off with my, male friends and go drinking at the bar because I don't want to leave my loved one at home alone. That's cruel and unusual punishment. And what they need to understand is that that you do have a purpose. You're helping somebody else, but just like when oxygen masks drop down and you're in a plane, you got to put it on yourself first because you're no good to anybody else. If they pass out and you pass out, nobody makes it. But if you have enough oxygen, you'll be able to make sure everybody gets along and does well. So absolutely, for care partners, you're already in a situation where you are helping somebody and the family and helping organize things. But I really strongly recommend that you realize that you need to get out of there at least once a week and go get some oxygen. And that's not for yourself. That's for your loved one and for your family, because if you're not recharging your engines, you're going to be in a tough place. So really, that's one of those cases where care partners are often, if anything, need a little bit of swinging, the pendulum swinging in the other direction, which is you're getting plenty of points for taking care of the families and your loved ones, but you're often not doing enough to take care of yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Great advice, too. There were a couple questions about Alzheimer's, as you mentioned. The first question is, do MS plaques that cause cognitive decline increase the risk of Alzheimer's?
So that is, again, a great question. And here's what I can tell you. I mean, if there is a silver lining here, this is maybe a silver lining, which is to say it's not, I never say never or always in medicine, but it is extremely unlikely that people with MS will develop Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't mean, by the way, having MS can affect people's cognition. And so it's not like, gee, this is a great thing that you'd want everybody to get as a protection from Alzheimer's. But having said that, many of the newest treatments being developed on the market right now, developed to enter the market, are antibodies that bind to these plaques in the brain and ways of having an immune response to the plaques that are from Alzheimer's. And what's interesting is, and some people are just now starting to study this, as to why people with MS are so rarely in a position where they develop Alzheimer's disease, and probably it's because having your brain have this immune system that's patrolling it, and when active, attacks various proteins in the brain. Amongst them, this immune system is probably helping to clear a lot of those Alzheimer's plaques away. So I can't say you have zero chance, but the chances of getting Alzheimer's with MS is extremely low.
Well, that's great information. And a second question around Alzheimer's is just generally, how early do you need to exercise and practice purpose in life to avoid the signs of cognitive decline or Alzheimer's down the road?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I can tell you is if you look at that study, oh, and by the way, again, one of the things that MSAA is so great about is not just holding these opportunities to provide information for people, but also getting it out in print. And so MSAA is going to be having a paper following this up, I don't know, perhaps in a month or two, couple months, Peter knows better than I, on the topic of purpose in life. So if you have questions or you say, gee, I can't remember this, that, or the other, it's coming to a Motivator magazine near you, sort of a synopsis of much of what we covered today. But it really is the case that that from the study, it was 6 years, right? I mean, that was a 6-year study. People had mild cognitive impairment, and as you could see, roughly 60 to 70% of people 6 years into it developed Alzheimer's. So, the earlier the better. Now it turns out that we know that people who were doing Sudoku and practicing engaging their brains from even a young age, from studies done in nunneries by nuns who kept these elaborate entry books when they came into becoming nuns, and then were looked very much later what their chances were of Alzheimer's. So even from young ages, everything, it's a use it or lose it proposition. But certainly, if you can intervene while people still have a significant amount of their cognition, it's going to be much better possibility, assuming that this is a cause and not a correlation, than waiting until someone has, the further along they are, the harder it is with any treatment to try to intervene with Alzheimer's.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned some of the activities in your responses, the lady climbing the mountain and traveling, and they sound great, but there were questions around people wondering when and how they could find the time to dedicate toward this, and even whether they feel guilty having some self-care activities with so much going on in their life with work and family balance. Can you address some of those concerns as well?
Yeah, so these are different, this is sort of, I just want to make sure I don't fall into the apples and oranges. So what I was talking about for care partners or care givers, it is to make sure you don't suffer this problem of thinking, oh, gee, I can't possibly go out and do the things that I'm able to, but my, the person I've tied my wagon to can't because of fatigue or what have you. And I'm not saying just run away. I'm saying at least once a week, make sure you go out and recharge your engines. And we know that the rates of depression among care partners are higher, that care partners don't take care of their own health. They don't get normal cancer screenings. They don't, in general, do those things. And again, the explanation is, gee, the reason why you hear on every single plane, if the oxygen mask drops down, you got to put it on yourself first, is because truly you have to find the time for yourself, because you're no good to anybody if you've exhausted your resiliency and your temper and your patients are afraid, then you're no good to anybody. So that's kind of one side of things. With regard to finding time, finding time is one of those things where, one of my patients said, you're either busy or you're dead. And it is a matter of prioritizing, but I can just tell you that as we learn more and more about purpose in life, that it kind of, it's kind of like just trying to earn money when you're younger and not do anything with it, all because you're saving it for old age, and then you find out in old age, you can't take it with you, and you get hit by a bus crossing the street. So you got to make time and got to prioritize things, as you're going through life. And one of those things that I would submit, because it has such a potential profound impact on people's health, is you got to make time for, finding a purpose and having the belief that your life has meaning and purpose. And, I know life can be incredibly busy. My life is incredibly busy. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite at all, but it is the case that, for the things that are important, children, parents, our significant others, we find time, no matter how busy we are. And this is just something I think that you can't afford not to find time for.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question. Person wrote in talking about how, with MS, they were unfortunately not able to work anymore and had other losses in their life, and wanted you to speak to adapting our purpose with MS as such a progressive disease.
Yeah, so, and again, thank you for bringing that up. This is one of the hardest topics because, unfortunately, for those of you who are in that situation, it's tough, and I'll address that in 1 second. For those of you who are not yet in that situation, I will tell you that there is all too often encouragement to say, hey, you had an exacerbation, it's going to take a year to recovery, you should really go on disability. And I just want people to be aware that disability is disabling. It's just very hard when you're being paid not to do any work to then say, I'm going to go start doing some work and lose all the money that I have. It's just a very difficult situation to be in. I do think that it is important to realize that for many people who literally, it's the stress and they can't do what they're doing, it's causing all sorts of negative health consequences. For sure, there are plenty of situations where disability, is advantageous, but then you're going to find yourself in a position where you still have to find, whether it's volunteering. One of the things that we began to do to look into this, and we didn't unfortunately have time to finish this up, but we did have some interesting initial findings before this website got taken down, where we had people going to an MS support website, and then we were assigning people who'd had MS for a while to then mentor people who were newly diagnosed, and you'd be shocked at how much you know just from insurance and adjusting to life and dealing with all of the concerns about what medicines and all of this stuff. So sometimes it's as simple as going to an MSAA support group and just talking to some other people and realizing how much knowledge and wisdom you've accumulated and how much difference that can make to people who are newly diagnosed and terrified.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. So that ends our question portion. And before we close with our thank you, I first, again, want to thank Dr. Kaplan for his incredible information and insights, and also ask Dr. Kaplan if you just wanted to provide a take-home message for the folks on the line today.
Yeah, I think my take-home message is this, which is that each person has to find their own purpose. But that doesn't mean you can't share it. So again, there are opportunities through MSAA, through the forums and the like. And my strong advice is, as you find things that are helpful, as you share things, as I see people are sharing things in this participant feedback, please help put that on the website. Enter those into the MSAA website and the like, and in response perhaps to this article that's coming out, because to be honest and truth, any physician who's being honest will tell you that most of what we learn is from you guys, and we just listen and we pass it on to other people. So thank you for your time tonight, and I encourage you to share the wisdom that you've already had and listen to your fellow participants. So thanks for your time.
Great, thank you. Well, that does conclude tonight's webinar, which, as a reminder, will be archived to our website within a few days. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Adam Kaplan for his time here tonight and helping us understand this truly fascinating topic that can make such a positive impact in all our lives. I also would like to thank Biogen and Genentech for supporting our new virtual display hall. As mentioned, MSAA has additional programs planned for the month of March, so please visit our MS Awareness Hub at mymsaa.org to learn more. And as Dr. Kaplan mentioned, our national magazine, The Motivator, is dedicating our cover story to purpose in life with interviews with Dr. Kaplan and other healthcare professionals, and that probably will be out by mid-April. So please keep an eye out for that, both in print and in digital on our website. And finally, we ask you to take a very brief survey that is coming up next. Your feedback is very important to us and will help us secure funding for future programs. So on behalf of MSAA and Dr. Kaplan, thank you so much for watching, and please stay safe.